Real-life stories with Liam Johnson. Subscribe and leave a like.
He woke up out of habit, listened to himself. A faint hope still flickered that maybe today he could wiggle his toes. No, it didn't work and never would again. He was a doctor, a titled surgeon, and he knew perfectly well that his legs and the entire lower half of his body no longer obeyed him. At least the attacking pain wasn't there right now. Smiling, he said aloud, "Good morning, Wesley Graham." He was alone in the house, no one could hear him. But saying Wesley Graham out loud somehow threw him back into childhood. That's how his mother used to greet him every morning. She had been a linguist, in love with literature, and had named him Wesley because his father's name was Graham. She adored the poetry of the old masters the way other people adored rock stars. The first poem he ever memorized with her was about a strange magical seashore where a learned cat walked round and round a golden chain. There were tricky R sounds in it, but he stubbornly pronounced every seashore until the whole fairy tale world came alive for him. He grew up, excelled at school, wrote the best essays, read constantly. Mom was certain her son would follow in her footsteps and become a scholar of language. Then, in the final quarter of his senior year, he announced to his parents that he was applying to medical school. Mom asked, confused, "Why, Wes?" Dad just looked at him, not knowing how to react. He too had been sure Wes would go Mom's way. All Wes said was, "I want to heal people." They didn't try to talk him out of it. In their family, everyone's choice was respected. They congratulated him when he was accepted. The competition was brutal, as always. Even after that, Mom kept hoping he'd change his mind the moment he stepped into the anatomy lab. He had been afraid of blood since childhood and always turned away when she dabbed his scraped knees with iodine. But Wes didn't change his mind. He sailed through without a single retake, counting the days until he could specialize, then start residency. He wanted to be a surgeon, and he became one. His parents didn't just reconcile themselves, they were proud. They lived long enough to see his growing reputation. It's a pity they didn't live longer. They weren't old yet. A drunk driver on a night highway took them both. 30 years later, fate repeated itself. Another drunk driver, maybe even related to the first one, crossed Wesley Graham Hartwell's path. He survived. As people say, half a man, but alive.
Now the name Wesley Graham could be spoken aloud again. Lydia, his caregiver, would arrive in half an hour. She was never late, and he always waited for her. He felt good around her. She was young enough to be his daughter, yet somehow she made everything easier. She should have been the doctor. Her hands never caused extra pain, and he knew how priceless that was for a suffering patient. Once he had only understood it theoretically. Now he knew it in practice. There were things he didn't want to remember. How Marlene left. How both sons took her side. He forced himself to hammer it in. You're alone now. Deal with it. But he quickly pushed the thought away so he wouldn't start talking aloud and have Lydia overhear. He'd be ashamed. Lydia had been the name of the first patient he ever saved when no one in the department believed the man would pull through. The illness was too advanced, the heart too weak. Wesley Graham Hartwell was just a junior surgeon then, not yet head of department, not yet a candidate of medical sciences. Yesterday's intern, happy to cover for anyone who needed a day off. But he already had a couple dozen operations under his belt, including complicated ones. That patient went under the knife largely because the night duty doctor, Wesley Graham Hartwell, insisted. When it was over and there was hope, when Wesley had scrubbed out praying he wouldn't be called back before morning, he stepped into the corridor and saw a young woman curled into a knot of anguish. He braced himself for questions. Instead, blood suddenly poured from her nose. The young surgeon sprang into action, led her to the residence room, applied the old-fashioned remedy, cold compress on the bridge of the nose, 10 minutes of calm. That was how he met his future wife. They married a year later. A year after that, Coleman was born. They lived what people call well, a roof over their heads. The apartment was a gift from both sets of parents. Jobs they both valued. Marlene stayed home for a while, then returned to her design office. Wesley's salary with all the extra shifts was more than decent. Those were the tangible things. The intangible ones were more precious. Wes and Marlene loved each other. Then they loved first one son, then 3 years later, another. Marlene grew used to her husband having no days off. He had become the best surgeon in the city. They called him in at any hour, even cut vacations short. She understood, and she explained it to the boys. They saw it themselves, how strangers in the park would approach their father and thank him, tearfully, for saving a relative, then turn to the kids. "You should be proud of your dad. He's a wizard." Wesley kept a notebook where he briefly recorded each operation. When something non-standard happened, he wrote in more detail. Marlene started noticing he had enough material for a dissertation. She hesitated for a long time before suggesting it. By the time she did, he had just been appointed head of the department. New equipment was arriving. He personally oversaw the installation, then mastered every machine himself. When everything settled, Marlene said, "Wes, you're ready to start your candidate's thesis. You have so much to share."
"I barely see the boys as it is," he replied, torn. "If I lock myself away to write, I'll become a hermit." He didn't yet know what barely really meant. After defending his thesis, conferences and symposia swallowed him whole. You couldn't refuse, representing national medicine. Publications, translations, endless nights at the laptop. He never considered giving up the scalpel for a purely administrative role. There wasn't a month he didn't operate at least once. Sometimes patients begged him personally to take their case. He understood their fear and their faith. He couldn't say no to that faith. By the time Coleman and 2 years later, Elliot finished high school, Wesley was almost never home. He never managed to talk to Coleman about college plans. He never even asked Elliot what he wanted to study. Marlene handled everything. The boys grew up comfortable, never wanting for anything. They could drop their famous last name when it helped. Once, when Coleman got into a bar fight, the police report mysteriously disappeared because your father saved this major's life, and not only his. Coleman came home shaken that his invisible father had fixed things without even knowing. Resentment accumulated. It finally exploded from Elliot one day. "So, you basically married the scalpel, Mom, and served it faithfully all these years." Marlene couldn't breathe for a moment. She had been thinking the same thing herself. That night she decided there was no family here. There never had been. Wes shouldn't have started one at all. He was married to surgery. She would let him go. When she told him over dinner that she wanted a divorce, he didn't understand at first. She explained calmly. They all felt gratitude toward him for the good life, for never having a single shouting match, but they hadn't felt a husband and father beside them in years. She would have understood another woman. There wasn't one. There was only work. Let him work without looking back. Wesley understood. He understood the boys. He understood nothing could be fixed. He blamed himself, but the faces of the patients he had saved stood before him. He was married to surgery. Guilty before his sons, guilty before Marlene, yet somehow he never guessed it hurt her this much. They parted peacefully, the way people who respect each other should. He divided everything into 3 equal parts, starter capital for each of them. He told them he was to blame, that work had always come first, that he accepted their decision. He would always help if they allowed contact. Later, he learned Marlene and the boys were moving to the neighboring city where Elliot was finishing college. They had already found apartments and jobs.
The move saved them from learning what happened to Wesley a few months later. He could have called from the hospital, but he didn't want pity to be the reason they returned. He intended to go on living, perhaps no longer operating, but still useful, systematizing everything he had learned through experience. Only he couldn't manage alone anymore. The country house was too big, His arms still worked, but the paralysis was complete from the chest down. After discharge, he started looking for a live-in caregiver, someone who could cook, help with daily needs. A friend, director of a nursing home, recommended Lydia. "She's gold," the friend said. "I'm tearing her away from my patients with pain in my heart, but you need her more." Wesley agreed, though he remained slightly wary, too much praise. The wariness melted the moment they met. Lydia won him over with her frankness and her hands that knew how to touch without causing extra pain. Pain had become his constant companion, though his former students had pulled him back from the tunnel he had heard so many patients describe. Lydia entertained him by retelling books. She had read far more than he had. She sensed when he needed a break from the laptop and announced "commercial break," switching his attention to something else. They talked about everything: politics, travel. She knew Tibet better than any place she had actually been. She dreamed of going there one day, fascinated by Tibetan medicine. "Why didn't you study medicine yourself?" he asked once, a little offended on behalf of traditional doctors. She said, "I'm from an orphanage. My grades weren't brilliant. Books won over homework." He didn't press further. He understood something's hurt to remember. But he believed she must study, that she would be a healer in any branch she chose. They shared another love, real coffee. She brewed it masterfully, but strictly forbade him a second cup after noon. He knew she was right. Caffeine was practically medicine for him now, and he had lectured patients about it 1,000 times.
One morning, he was waiting, half sitting, for the allowed cup. Lydia brought the tray, set it on the bedside table. Her phone rang. She dropped it, bent to pick it up, and as she straightened, her head knocked the tray. His cup tipped, splashing hot coffee across her shoulder. Wesley tried to help. Lydia instinctively pulled the burning t-shirt away from her skin and froze when she saw his face. On her slightly exposed shoulder, just like on his own, was the small constellation of moles his mother had called the seashore. He had never seen it on anyone else. Now they would finally talk. 25 years earlier, a young intern named Wes had asked to spend his summer practice in a remote rural clinic. There, he fell in love with a nurse named Tessa Raylene Carter. They both fell hard. Then they quarreled. She wrongly suspected him of flirting with a visiting doctor. He left angry without saying goodbye, planning to propose at the bus stop. Pride kept her away. They never saw each other again. A month later, Tessa discovered she was pregnant. She never wrote. She gave birth to a girl, signed the relinquishment papers, and moved far beyond Alaska. She never stopped thinking about the child, never forgave herself, but believed the baby was better off without her. Cancer took her quickly. Only at the end did she write a letter to the daughter she had named Lydia in the orphanage records, telling her everything, begging her not to hate her father. He had known nothing, and the jealousy had been childish stupidity. "Find him," she wrote. "He is a good man, so good that he will stay good forever. Don't be alone the way I was." Lydia found him, learned he was a famous surgeon, married, 2 sons, life in order. She stayed away. Then the accident happened. The whole city talked about whether the best surgeon would survive. Lydia, who had never known either parent, wept for the father she had never met and the mother already gone. When she heard he was left completely alone, wife and sons moved away, she made a decision. She quit the nursing home, asked the director to recommend her to Wesley Hartwell, and invented a story about moving to the cottage village to care for an aunt. In reality, she rented a room from an elderly couple in the neighboring hamlet. She just wanted to be near him to help. She had seen his seashore 100 times while changing his pajamas, the exact same pattern on the exact same spot.
"Forgive me, Wesley Graham," Lydia said, tears falling faster than she could wipe them. "I'm the one who needs forgiveness, sweetheart. Forgive me. And if your mother can hear, let her forgive me too." He could barely speak through his own tears. "There's only one thing I'll ask of you, Lydia. Anything. Will you, someday, call me Dad? Not today. Whenever you're ready. I've wanted to say it my whole life. I won't get tired of saying it 100 times a day. But first, I have to tell you, I'm proud of you. As the best surgeon, as a decent human being, and as the bravest man I know. Not everyone could endure this the way you do. Dad." They talked that day and for many days after.
Lydia moved into the house for good. She enrolled in preparatory courses for medical school. Wesley started the legal process to establish paternity. Soon, she would officially be Lydia Graham Hartwell. He quietly rewrote the house to her name. She protested at first, but he insisted. He would never walk again. The injury was too high. But he stayed strong. He worked on his doctoral dissertation. Colleagues consulted him. He was still in the game, and that mattered. Only one thing gnawed him. He missed Coleman and Elliot terribly, and Marlene. Lydia sensed it. One day she found their address, took the train to the neighboring city, and told Marlene everything. About the accident, about Tessa, showed her the matching seashore on her shoulder. Marlene understood immediately. There was no one left to be angry with. Together they went to Coleman, who was about to get married. They called Elliot. They talked, this time with Lydia present. The three brothers still loved their father, were still angry, but love won. They drove back with Lydia. She waited downstairs while the three men talked for hours. Then they called her up themselves. The next morning, Wesley dared to phone Marlene. She came that same day. What would happen next? Life would show. One thing was certain. They would always respect one another. And that, in the end, is the most important thing of all.